Ken Goldin of Goldin Auctions recently did an Instagram Live where he talked about the state of the sports card hobby, and I'm going to go over one of the main points that I think is very important for people to know. Goldin Auctions recently had a huge round of auctions end on their website, and totaling the sales were over $33 million. There were some huge cards that sold. I'm going to talk about those cards actually in a separate video and podcast, but this one I'm going to talk about where Ken Goldin, he did a Instagram live / Instagram post that I definitely suggest that you go to check out. He is the owner of Goldin Auctions, one of the biggest, probably the biggest auction house for sports cards and sports memorabilia. So in this Instagram live, he talked about the state of the hobby, kind of bringing up some of the points that Vegas Dave talked about. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, this is actually the second segment that you're going to hear, and it's kind of a good tie-in to what Vegas Dave was saying about the sports card hobby potentially collapsing. Now, he brought on a couple guests, and he talked about some pretty big points that he's seeing as being someone who has been in the hobby basically their whole entire life. He talked about at the beginning being 12 years old and putting out advertisements saying that he's selling sports cards, and over this 40-year career, he's not seen really crazy things like this, but in that 40 years, he has seen the hobby grow, and he's been one of these hobby lifers, I guess you could call him. So I think he has a lot of trust, and what he says, I think, matters a lot in this hobby. So he brought on Gary Vee, and actually, I think one of the most important points throughout this whole entire broadcast was made here, and I'm going to play the video right now.
And the thing that I think people are missing with Jordan is the uncomfortable demand of the 45 to 75-year-old high wealth.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, as I said to people, and not to mention a name, but if Mark Zuckerberg came to me and said, Ken, I want you to buy me 25 Jordans, I want Jordans, it doesn't matter to him what he pays. He wants the cards.
So for context of this video, they were talking about the Jordan card, and specifically the Jordan PSA 10, which two of them recently sold for an extremely high number in Goldin Auctions this weekend. And, I think the point that I have been trying to talk about, I think I put that in my Gary Vee post that I did a couple weeks ago. So the Jordan card, the Jordan Fleer PSA 10, there's only 317 of them currently, and he's one of the most iconic athletes of all time, so you figure there's got to be more than 317 people that want this card. And I think what we are seeing, and one of the main points that I have been trying to talk about and talk about more in other podcasts and videos, I don't think we've seen the hobby grow in the way that we've seen it in the past few years, in the past decade, but I think one of the things that is happening, and I think one of the things that's going to happen in the future that will completely grow the hobby even exponentially more than it is now, is going to be wealthy people coming into the hobby. People like me and you, we like sports cards, and so it's not like an unusual thing for someone to like. I think a very normal person might like sports cards, if they're into fantasy sports or they're into sports betting. Sports cards is a very easy change from either of those two things specifically, and I think people coming in that have millions, billions, I mean, the amount of millionaires and billionaires that I think aren't even in the hobby yet, like athletes, business owners, entrepreneurs, like all those types of people. I mean, we like I said, we just saw Rob Go. He bought the $5.2 million mantle card as like a piece of art similar to other vintage cards that he really likes. And I think we're going to see more of those types of people, more entrepreneurs, and even maybe people with VCs like venture capital funds coming in. And I think we are seeing it. Like if you listen to that whole broadcast and you listen to the whole part with Gary and Ken talking, they've mentioned a ton of times that there's people hitting them up on a daily basis, 10, 20, 30 people that they know from business, like not just regular sports card people. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now. We're seeing sports card people who made their money in sports cards were the ones that were buying these cards, and I think that's one of the main reasons why the Jordan card can jump in just under a month from about $250,000 to almost $750,000, which I think two of them sold around that price range in this round of Goldin Auctions. It's one of the main reasons because, like Ken talked about Mark Zuckerberg as an example. I think that was a hypothetical scenario, but like if someone were to hit up Ken Goldin or they were to hit up Gary Vee and say, I want 10 Michael Jordan cards, they're getting a very significant portion of that of that population of the PSA 10s. And I think what maybe people are underestimating, and maybe, you know, if you see people like Vegas Dave talking about a crash, or you go on Twitter, people talk about the crash all the time. And I think the one thing that's important to note too with the crash is that there's no expiration date on those people's takes about the crash. Like, those same people that are talking about how the sports card market is going to crash, it doesn't matter if it goes down 10%, 20%, 50%. They're going to talk about how this is it. This is the crash. So, like, don't, you know, it's good to be optimistic, but it's also bad to be pessimistic. I think that maybe is the point there. Like, you're going to see, if you're new getting into this, that tons of people are talking about the crash like it's something that's imminent. And, you know, you Vegas Dave people talking about 24 to 36 months, and I just don't necessarily agree. And I think Ken Goldin had a very great quote at the beginning of the broadcast that I think you should check out, and he said that I was actually very hilarious, because he was just like, he pulled up his iPad and he looked at it and he goes, some people on the internet are talking about that the sports card market is going to crash and that sports cards are worthless. And then he goes, and I took that personally. And, you know, when he said that, I was like, wow, maybe I should have taken maybe I should be taking it more personally. Like, because this is, you know, you're watching this video, maybe you listen to the podcast, maybe you follow me on Instagram, but this is like sort of my interest. So like, when someone says that your interest is going to become worthless, like, maybe I should be taking it a little bit more seriously. And, you know, I don't know, maybe I should, because like I said, I've talked about in that previous Vegas Dave video and audio, is just that, like, he's good at making provocative content to get clicks and get people to click on his profile. And, you know, saying that he thinks the sports car market is going to collapse, I think is a very controversial thing to say, especially when you have been very adamant about buying. I don't know, whatever. We're gonna get past Vegas Dave's point here, because I want to get back into the Gary Vee and Ken Goldin point. There's people that are going to come into the hobby that have millions, they have billions, and they're going to look at a card. And I don't know, I've talked about this on multiple occasions. I don't know specifically when I can point back to it, but just as an example, like, if Luka cards are, you know, if they're 1,500 to 1,800, and someone that has millions or billions comes into the conversation, and I think they would probably be looking at more like a LeBron Chrome at like 20,000. But okay, actually, yeah. So let's use LeBron Chrome at 20,000. Say that LeBron Chrome is 20,000. Say it's selling consistently at 20,000. But on eBay at the current moment of when someone that has a ton of wealth wants to buy the card, there's only a couple up for one's 22, one's 25. They're going to buy the one for 22, and they're not going to necessarily care that there's a $2,000 difference, because it's just, for them, it's like, it's not like that difference in money really isn't that big of a deal. So they're going to look at that 22, and even if it's 25, even if it's a $5,000 difference, they're just going to buy the 25 because they want the card at the moment when they're going to buy it. Like, you know, I guess it's similar to like if someone's going to a store and they see a pair of shoes that they want and they're not on sale, but like, some people, like maybe like myself, maybe might wait for a sale, but like people that are wealthy, like athletes and billionaires and people who own businesses, like that's not really their mindset. Like, they will just buy the thing because they want it at that current moment. And, you know, that's kind of what I think is going to happen with sports cards. So like, you potentially could see cards sell for 20%, 30% over market value, and maybe that won't create a new like a new baseline for that card, but I think that they're going to be buying those cards if they want them at the moment. Like Ken Goldin said in the video, he said if Mark Zuckerberg comes to me and says that he wants 5 to 10 Jordan cards, he doesn't care what he's paying for them. So he doesn't care whether they're $750,000 or $250,000. You know, obviously Mark Zuckerberg, a pretty extreme example, one of the more rich people in the United States and in the world. But I think there's also, on a smaller scale, like the LeBron card, I think is a perfect example. Someone who wants a LeBron card, if they want a Topps Chrome PSA 10 and that card is $20,000 to $25,000, if there are a bunch of them that are all available for, you know, 40, maybe 30, those people are just going to buy the cards because the extra $10,000 to them is much different than what $10,000 would be for me and you. And I think people are underestimating that fact when it comes to sports cards, and it's one of the main reasons, in my opinion, why I don't think that we're going to see a crash. Like, I think I've seen a lot of prospecting people and people within prospecting kind of shift their views, and just prospecting in general. Like, you go to baseball, and prospecting is still very big in baseball, and it's one of the main ecosystems within baseball itself, like the top 100 prospects, which is another video that I'm going to be talking about soon. But like those top 100 prospects and their cards, you know, those players are still going to be popular and still prospecting is still going to be a thing. But I just don't necessarily think like the top prospects that are extremely expensive are worth it versus like if you could buy the same card like of a Mookie Betts that you can of a Wander Franco, which I think it may be a little bit off as an example. I think you probably might look at like a Nolan Arenado who recently just got traded compared to Wander Franco, or like a Jason Dominguez. Like I just see those opportunities, and I think that there's so much better opportunities for people to get in that aren't prospecting. So, you know, people are going to get into cards that have wealth. And I don't know if we've necessarily seen the amount of people that are going to get in, because if someone, and I think it's realistically, it's going to take one very wealthy person. It's going to take one Drake, or, you know, one Leonardo DiCaprio, or like one famous athlete, one LeBron to get in, and then other people are going to be like interested in what they're talking about, and then they're going to get similar cards because, you know, if you're LeBron, you're a professional basketball player, so you're not spending hours and hours, or maybe he is, I don't know for sure, but like you're probably not spending hours and hours doing research on which card to buy. So, you know, you're buying the first one that you see, whether that's a Topps Chrome LeBron PSA 10 or an Exquisite, but then another athlete or someone that you know that's also wealthy comes to you and say, which card did you buy? I want to get one of those. They're going to tell you that specific one, and they're going to say, just get this one. Because, you know, for someone like me who's a commentator on the whole hobby, if someone were to say, I have X amount of dollars, which card should I buy? I'm going to be pushing them towards, you know, some of these legends and Hall of Fame and vintage stuff rather than some of these prospects. And I think that's kind of what we are starting to see in the hobby. But, you know, as more wealth comes in, I think we're going to continue to see pretty exponential increases in a lot of these cards. Now, you know, obviously be careful with what you're buying, because, you know, don't put any money into cards that you aren't willing to lose, because it's just like any other investment. It's just like if it goes to zero, you know, which I don't think cards will ever go to zero necessarily, but like I think there are some players that if they don't pan out, their cards may go to zero. But I think what Gary Vee and what Ken Goldin talked about, I just think is people are underestimating that fact, and, you know, I think in the next few years that's what we're going to see rather than maybe a collapse in the market. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it and want to learn more about sports cards and stay up to date with hobby news, make sure you hit the subscribe button and give this video a like.